Alright, so we're on to nutrition now. Okay, so regarding nutrition. Now my goal is not to give you a diet. It is to teach you principles so that you're able to make your own diet. And then you'll also know how to adjust your diet so that you don't have to rely on me or any other coach, right? Because you don't want someone just to give you a meal plan and then you're not sure why you're increasing food or decreasing food or where to go from there. You're going to be able to do this all yourself so you don't have to rely on anyone else. So the topic of food is made to be much more complicated than it should be. I mean, food is really simple. Right now, as it is, you eat a certain amount of food to be the weight and the body composition that you are right now. You've probably been eating this way for a long time. You eat a certain amount of food that's maintaining your current weight, whatever that is, whether you're stuck at 210 or 150 or whatever it is, you're eating a certain amount of food to stay at that level, to stay at that weight, right? And that's your baseline. That's your baseline level of food, and this is your baseline diet. This is your point of reference. You are here. This is where you're starting from, right? Now, if you want to put on muscle, generally you're going to have to eat more than your current baseline. And if you would like to burn fat, generally you're going to have to eat less than your current baseline. Now, we're talking all else being equal, and right now we're just talking about food. We're not talking about cardio or training to lose fat or anything like that. We're talking about using just food by itself. Because some of you might be saying, well, can't you just eat the same amount of food that you do right now and then do cardio to burn fat or do weight training to burn fat? And yeah, of course you can. But right now I'm going to talk about how the food side of it works. So it's pretty simple. You increase the amount of food to build up, and then you decrease the amount of food to chisel down. So that there's no secret there. This is how it works. And this is how bodybuilders have been getting jacked and shredded for decades. And that's why they measure all of their food. That way they can tell exactly how much they're going to be increasing or decreasing their food by and what effect it's having on their fat loss or muscle gain, right? Now, they want to have a body of perfection, bodybuilders, competitive bodybuilders, with complete and absolute OCD control over this. So they measure everything, and they eat the same foods or same rotation day in and day out for months. And this allows them to come into the contest looking freaking awesome. Now, I've competed myself, and I've measured food, and I meal prepped for the week, and I do know how tedious and time-consuming it can be. I'm not going to lie. Measuring works the best by far, right? Because you're taking the randomness and the guesswork out of it. There's no room for error when you do it that way. Now, most people are not competitive bodybuilders, and they're not willing to cook and prepare a week's worth of meals. Other people, they just don't want to change their lifestyle to that extent, and that's perfectly fine. I mean, you don't have to get all crazy and hardcore to get a better body. In fact, it's very hard not to get a better body if you just put in a little effort into the process. Now, without measuring your food, you can still apply the concept of eat more to build and eat less to chisel. But if you're not weighing your food, counting calories or counting macros, you have to have some way to tell if you're going to be eating more or less. So that means you're going to have to eat a relatively consistent diet. So, for example, let's say every day you have the same thing for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? Now, all of a sudden, you add a bagel in, you've increased your calories and that you're eating more, even if you don't know the actual math. But if you just eat random things every day with no type of structure, it's extremely hard or impossible to know how much you're eating or if on average you're eating more or less. So it's very similar to people who just go to the gym and do random things every time. They make progress because they're still putting in some work over a period of time, but it definitely won't be optimal, and they're not maximizing the progress they could be making. And it's also very possible that you could be severely sabotaging your progress by guessing wrong, by thinking you're getting stronger when you're not, or thinking you're eating more when actually you've been eating less. And that's just a huge waste of time and effort, right? Because, I mean, if we're going to the gym and we're putting in a ton of work and expecting results, and then we're guessing wrong on food, that's completely unnecessary. And that's why I do recommend establish some type of eating routine that's consistent. Now, in the bodybuilding community, I mean, 5 to 6 meals a day is the norm. It's meant to speed up the metabolism. However, the research shows that it's really no better than, let's say, 3 meals a day. You know, the increased amount of meals doesn't actually speed up the metabolism. So you don't have to have 5 to 6. So personally, I prefer the standard breakfast, lunch, and dinner template. It's much easier to adhere to for me. And if you do want a simple way to increase the calories, you can put protein shakes in between your meals or add them around your workout. It doesn't have to be protein shakes. It can be any snack or a small meal. The point is that by eating 3 times a day, the same meals, you can easily adjust your diet to your goals. So if you're used to eating the same 3 meals and you throw in a protein shake after your workout, now you know you're getting more calories, more protein, so you can gauge by that way. But you're going to need to be consistent if you're not measuring anything, so you have that point of reference to go from. Okay, let's see. I'm going to break down some key information about nutrition, and then you can decide just how involved or hardcore you're going to want to get with this, right? Now, I want to explain fat loss, the fat loss process in a simple way. You might have heard the word metabolism being thrown around. You might hear someone say, I have a slower metabolism, so I gain weight real easily. Or, I have a fast metabolism, so I could eat anything I want and not gain a pound. Right? Now, metabolism is nothing more than the chemical reactions that happen in your body. So, a faster metabolism basically means more reactions in the body, which require more energy, and so you can eat a little more. And the easiest way that I like to think about the metabolism is to think of it like the fire inside of a fireplace. The slower the metabolism, the smaller the flame, and the less heat energy it emits. The faster the metabolism, the bigger the flame, and the more heat generated. So think of food like the wood that you throw in the fire. The bigger and brighter the fire is burning, the more wood it's going to be able to burn through. So you feed it more. Now this is the same concept with your metabolism. The more wiggle room you have in terms of calories, the more you'll be able to play with your diet. What I mean is that someone who is maintaining their current weight on a higher number of calories, they're going to be able to diet longer and harder. So if you eat 4,000 calories a day to maintain your current weight, dropping to 3,500 a day won't be a problem. But if you maintain your weight on 2,000 calories a day, that same 500 calorie cut to 1,500 will probably be too severe. The problem is the calorie levels are way too low to support a high intensity training program, and your muscles, they're going to start to be burned off as fuel. Similarly, if you go from 3,000 calories a day to 2,500 calories a day, now that's a small enough drop to burn almost all body fat. But if you go from, let's say, 3,800 calories a day to 2,500 calories a day, that will probably be too severe of a cut, and you will likely burn muscle as well as body fat to make up for such a huge deficit. Not to mention that such a drastic drop would result in large strength and performance decreases, which would further reduce the stimulation placed on the muscle and encourage even more muscle loss. So you definitely don't want to do anything too drastic for all of those reasons that I just mentioned. Now, it works the same the other way as well. If you're eating 2,500 calories and you go to 3,000 to build muscle, then you should be fine and slowly accumulate lean muscle mass. However, if you go from eating 2,500 calories to, let's say, 4,000 calories in your quest to get Hulk sized, then you're surely going to gain a large amount of fat with that muscle. Now, so going to extremes in either direction is detrimental to your long-term progress. So don't rush in either case. You want to coax the gains slowly by making a consistent and steady effort. Simply put in the work and be patient. Of course, if you measure your food, making small changes is easy. If you try to eat randomly, it becomes much harder, if not impossible, to wing it accurately. Let's talk about protein. Now, protein is extremely important because it is the only nutrient that can actually turn into muscle. Even if you are eating enough total calories, if you don't eat enough protein, you will not be able to build muscle. That's obvious, right? Everyone knows you need to eat protein to build muscle, but just how much? Well, it's really hard to say. But the research shows it's somewhere in the vicinity of 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. Okay, so write that down. 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. So let's say you weigh 200 pounds, right? And you train hard 3 to 5 times a week with weights, and you want to build muscle. That calculates to 200 pounds times 0.8 grams per pound, which is 160 grams of protein per day. Now that's not for everyone. That's if you weigh 200 pounds. Now, to some hardcore bodybuilders, that will sound really low. To normal humans, that will sound really high. Now, that's just to make sure you're making the most progress possible. You know, you don't want to put any hard work to waste, so you want to cover it with that amount of protein. And I mean, a lot of bodybuilders, they do eat much more protein than that, sometimes even double that amount. However, a lot of times these athletes are also, they're using steroids or some form of PEDs, and their bodies are able to utilize, you know, higher amounts of protein to build muscle even quicker than everyone else. So the recommendations I just spoke about, and all of the recommendations in any of these videos, is for the natural athlete. Now, the best sources of protein for building muscle are animal sources. You know, animals. So such sources include turkey breasts, you know, chicken breasts, fish, eggs, animal byproducts, things like milk, yogurt, cheese, whey protein supplements, just to name a few. And I do want to point out right here that I do not believe that this is the absolute healthiest diet for human beings. I believe that the optimal diet, as far as human health is concerned, does not include meat. However, this video series is not about achieving optimal health. This is about building muscle, and let me tell you, including animal products will make that job much easier. If you are very, very concerned with your health, there are ways to make animal products healthier than the current version, such as eating organic and whatnot, but in and of themselves, meat is not nearly as nutrient dense as other foods are. That would definitely be preferable for the optimal health diet. So don't get me wrong, protein from other sources is great. It's just that you have to eat a really large volume of vegetables, lots of soy, or a fart-worthy amount of beans to meet the protein requirements listed above. Okay, it's much easier to reach your protein requirements by eating meat. So that's what we're gonna do. The simple chicken breast can have anywhere from, let's say, 35 to 42 grams of protein all by itself, right? So to most people, they're going to be above the 100 grams of protein per day mark. You know, if they just eat 3 meals a day that include animal sources of protein, it's going to make it very easy to reach that goal, because most people will need to eat that amount once they calculate the requirement. So some people, they're going to need to eat closer to 200 grams of protein a day if you're on the heavier side. So to eat that amount, it really helps to include protein shakes in between your meals or around your workout. A protein shake with 2 scoops of whey, now that's around 50 grams, and that's a game changer when you have high protein requirements, let me tell you. Protein shakes, they especially help when you don't feel like eating such large amounts of food. You know, if you don't have a big appetite like myself. Protein needs also, they vary depending on the person's body weight, body composition, training intensity, and total calories. So, I mean, the 0.8 grams is a guide. It's not the holy grail or anything like that, obviously. Because like I just said, all the factors I just named, they affect the amount of protein, whether you should increase or decrease it. So, I mean, those are a few things to keep in mind as you create your nutrition plan and customize it to your own situation. So, the more you weigh, the more protein you need. Makes sense, right? The harder you train, the more protein you need. Makes sense, right? The better your body composition is, the higher that the protein requirements are. So, for example, if you weigh 200 pounds and you're 15% body fat, you're going to need less protein than the same person who's also 200 pounds but has 6% body fat. Because in the second person, they're going to have more muscle mass at the same weight, which means that in order to maintain that larger amount of muscle, they're going to need to consume a higher amount of protein or calories as well. The more calories you eat, the lower the percentage of protein that is required. So for example, if you're not eating enough calories to support your current muscle and your training routine, all of the protein that you eat is going to go to waste to fuel the body. The more calories you eat, the less your body is going to rely on that protein because it's getting all this energy coming in as fuel. So the less calories you eat, the more your body is going to rely on protein. And therefore, protein requirements are slightly higher when you're cutting than when you're bulking, because the reasons I just mentioned, when your calories are higher, your body will not rely on protein as much for fuel. So it can go towards building muscle. That's why another reason you eat more food when your goal is to build muscle, and another reason to prioritize. So if you do not eat enough protein, it becomes impossible to recover and build muscle, because you literally don't have the elements you need to do that, which would be protein. Now, carbohydrates and fats, they can both be stored by the body pretty well, but protein, on the other hand, it can't be stored by the body to any large degree, so therefore it must be consumed in pretty consistent intervals throughout the day. And that's another reason that old school mentality recommends the 5 to 6 meals a day. And while I think that that's excessive because it's not practical for most people, if you go into a hard training session not having eaten for 8 hours, then your body is going to break down your muscle tissue to get the amino acids it needs, and that we definitely do not want. So any decrease in muscle, no matter how small, is going to slow down your metabolism and make it that much harder to be a fat burning machine. So we definitely want to get in protein at consistent intervals throughout the day. Carbohydrates. What a big topic, right? Carbohydrates are the body's primary source of energy during weight training. Oftentimes, people, they cut out carbohydrates from their diet, but when you do that, you're going to lack the necessary energy to train as intensely as you possibly can, right? Without eating carbs, you're not going to have as good of a workout as you could. You know, carbs are not evil. Carbs are not the devil. You know, carbs are actually the brain and the body's preferred source of energy. So if you're training really hard in an attempt to build muscle, but you're eating too few carbs, then your body's going to start using protein as fuel. Now, whether that protein is from a chicken breast that you just ate or from the muscle that you're breaking down within your body, you don't want to use protein as fuel for your weight training. You need to make sure that you're eating enough carbohydrates that your body never has to tap into the protein storage for fuel. And at the same time, you don't want to stuff yourself with bagels unchecked, because your total calories could be way out of control, right? And we don't want that. Now, carbohydrate is similar to protein in that the more muscle that you carry, the more carbohydrate you require. Another way that carbohydrate is similar to protein is that the more active you are and the more intensely you train, the more carbohydrates you need. So when you eat carbohydrates, they enter your bloodstream as sugar. Now, the body likes a certain amount of sugar in the blood, so it will leave that amount in there, and any extra can be taken away to deliver to the muscles, because that's where the carbohydrates are going to be stored. They're stored in your muscles and in your liver. And when they're full of carbohydrates, then any excess sugar in your bloodstream is going to be converted into fat. And that is probably why people fear carbohydrates, simply because they eat too many. When your liver's full and when your muscles are full, it gets stored as fat. So it's not a carbs are bad problem, it's a you can't stop eating problem. Right? So what happens is, when you make carbohydrates the enemy, far too often you end up eating too few of them. So when you first start weight training, your body's going to use up the sugar in your bloodstream, and then when that runs low, it's going to go inside the stored carbohydrates inside your muscle to use as energy in order to complete the weight training session. So it's very important to have enough carbohydrates in your stores, that they're almost full, so that doesn't tap into the protein, but you don't want to eat too many that you're storing it as fat. So by having your carbohydrate level sufficiently high, your body's going to be able to use any protein that you do eat to repair and build muscle tissue, because it won't be being used as energy because you'll be eating enough carbohydrates. So now if you simply eat the right amount of macronutrients, then you're going to see amazing results. Some people, they struggle with fat loss, or they have problems with insulin, and they may need to implement further techniques to increase results. For example, eating 5 to 6 times a day will spread out their carbohydrates throughout the course of a day, so that in any one meal, their insulin is going to be kept at a low level, because by avoiding large insulin spikes, they're making it that much harder to store body fat. Another technique is to eat a large portion of your carbs at breakfast, because your body hasn't eaten for, let's say, 8 to 12 hours. The carbohydrates in the muscle, have been used up a little bit for energy from the night before during sleep. So when you consistently train hard with weights and your muscle stores are not full, when you eat carbohydrates, they're going to likely be stored in the muscle, the new carbohydrates, as opposed to being stored as fat, because your body prioritizes the storage of carbohydrates into the muscle first and foremost, because you train hard and it knows you need them. Very similarly, as soon as you're done weight training, your body has burned through a bunch of the carbs that were stored in your muscles, not to mention the carbs that were in your bloodstream. Now this leaves a great opportunity to consume another large amount of carbohydrates in one sitting, just like for breakfast, right? And even more so now, your body's going to prioritize shuttling any carbohydrates you eat back into the muscle to start the recovery and rebuilding process. So when you combine protein and carbohydrates post-workout, the carbohydrates actually help the protein get shuttled into the muscles. So hard weight training breaks down the muscle, and eating carbohydrates with protein after your workout will start to reverse that breakdown process. So carbohydrates are very important at this time. We do always want to protect our muscle tissue, and we always want to use as many strategies as possible to protect it. And another way to use carbohydrates to protect your muscle protein is to make sure that you have some carbs in your system before you train. Don't have a 5-hour gap between the last meal you ate and your workout. Eat something 1 to 2 hours before your workout. Just see that you have something in your system, something in your body to feed off of. The pre-workout carbs, they're not as important as the post-workout carbs. Even if you don't eat anything for your workout, you should still have enough carbs in your muscles to keep you from using protein as energy if you are actually eating enough carbs throughout the day, which you should be. And when we talk about carbs, we often hear people talk about the glycemic index, and this is supposed to measure how fast the carb is broken down into sugar and enters the bloodstream. And Now, if you really struggle losing fat, or you have severe insulin problems, then eating slow digesting carbohydrates is probably a good idea. However, I think the fast acting, slow acting, complex, simple, all the debate going on about carbohydrates, I think it's overhyped and overcomplicated. While it is true that complex carbohydrates are generally healthier foods, as long as your total carbohydrate intake is at the correct level, the average healthy trainee should see differences and results in regards to building muscle, whether they eat, the different kinds that people debate. Now, this is where the term "if it fits your macros" comes from. The concept is that if you can eat the correct amount of protein, carbohydrates, and fat in terms of their correct amounts and ratios, it doesn't matter where the food comes from, whether it's sweet potatoes for your carbohydrates or bagels. They say you should see the same results as far as body composition changes. Now, one thing I want you to keep in mind, however, is that although you can build muscle or get ripped with a variety of foods, and although "if it fits your macros" does work, keep in mind that it's not necessarily the healthiest thing to do. Just because a gram of carbohydrates from a bagel has the same body composition effect as a gram of carbohydrates from a potato doesn't mean the bagel has the same effect on your health. So in any case, this course isn't about optimal health, although I like to mention it. So the total amount of carbs that you consume every day is definitely the most important thing. Only after that does the source of the carbs and the quality of the carb matter, but much less than you might think. So focus on the amount of carbs over any other consideration. Sounds crazy, but it's true. Okay? So I do want to go over the hierarchy of nutritional importance. Now, this is the framework of what is most important in regards to your diet. I want you to pay attention to this because I don't want you wasting time worrying about the little things that are of little importance, and I do want you spending your time focusing on the top two most important things, as they will most directly be responsible for your results. Now, you may have heard of the law of thermodynamics. It basically has to do with the energy your body takes in and the energy your body expends. It's an in and out energy balance kind of thing. Now, your total caloric intake is the number one most important thing regarding nutrition and its effect on your body composition results. Okay? The reason has to do with the law of thermodynamics. Now, if you eat way more calories than your body needs for maintenance, repair, and rebuilding, then your goal to get shredded is not going to happen. If you're eating way less than your body needs for maintenance, repair, and rebuilding, then you're never going to be building muscle mass. So that's why this is number one. If you want to grow, you have to supply your body the energy it needs. And if you want to get shredded, then you need to lower the energy supply a bit. That's it. So that's number one. Makes sense, right? Now, the number two most important thing on your journey regarding nutrition are the macronutrient amounts, or the macronutrient ratios. This is the ratio of fat to protein to carbohydrates. This is the second thing you need to focus on, because let's say 2,000 calories is the perfect amount. If you're getting them all from Pepsi, this is obviously not going to work. There has to be some amount of protein in there for maintaining and building muscle, along with its many other functions. There has to be some amount of fat in there for basic health functions and to keep us sane. And then the balance of the calories will come from carbohydrate. So that's what we need to focus on, is the amounts of each category we want every day. These are the two things that are going to bring you the most results possible. Now, underneath that would be the other considerations for optimizing your physique, which would include, let's say, the timing of nutrients, when you eat. That would, let's say, be under that in importance, and under that even the different micronutrients, different vitamins and minerals, and how they can affect things, as long as you're not severely deficient, obviously. That would go under there too. So, but I want you focusing on the top two because those are going to have the real changes as far as building muscle and losing fat is concerned. So, let's see. Okay, so we're gonna move on to establishing a reference diet. Okay, so the goal with this is to establish or at least approximate your current calorie intake so that we have a starting point upon which we're going to manipulate to either build muscle mass or to shed body fat. Right now, you're going to have to establish accurate protein requirements for yourself based on your body mass. Right? So, the first step, which I just mentioned, is we're going to calculate or approximate the calories that we currently eat. The second step is going to be we're going to establish our protein requirements. Our third step is going to be to alter our carbohydrate timing, right? So we're going to want to eat more carbs during breakfast and more carbs after our workout. You could even put additional carbs in, after, and around the workout, which will help with recovery. Slower burning carbs should be consumed during periods of inactivity in order to control your insulin levels. So, for example, if you train early in the morning, your carbohydrate intake should be high during the beginning of the day, around the workout, and then get lower and lower towards the end of the day. And in a similar fashion, the faster acting carbs can also be eaten at the beginning of the day, also around the workout, and then as the day progresses, slower and slower digesting carbs and more fibrous carbs will be eaten. So fibrous carbs are those super low calorie vegetables that are pretty insignificant in terms of calories and carbohydrate, but they have a pretty significant amount of fiber. And I want to mention fiber because fiber is very important to your health and for your fat loss, because along with consuming the right amount of carbohydrates, eating them at the right times is also important. And in addition to that you get the recommended daily amount of fiber as well, because anywhere between 15 to 30 grams of fiber per day is really going to help your body stay consistent, your bowel movements. It will lower your insulin levels to help you control your fat loss so you don't store body fat as easily. But you don't want to go from eating 0 fiber to 40 grams of fiber, in one day, because your body's not going to like it, and neither are the people sitting next to you on the bus. So increase it gradually, but get yourself up to a level where you're eating fiber every day, because a lot of people, they don't really pay attention to fiber, and it's pretty important actually. So think about it. And when talking about fat, it's pretty simple. We want to eat enough fat to stay healthy, but we definitely don't want to eat more than necessary, because we're trying to get as ripped as possible, right? So we want to eat enough to stay healthy. So what's healthy, right? Well, the research says that if you completely cut fat out of your diet, it will affect things like testosterone levels and other hormones negatively. It also shows that if you consume at least 20% of your calories from fat, healthy fats, you should be fine. Now, a large portion of that percentage is going to come from other foods that you eat anyway. So for example, when you eat chicken, turkey, beef, dairy products, or other high protein foods, you might even hit the 15% fat mark without even intentionally including fatty foods. So if you want to create a high muscle, low fat physique, we're going to try to keep the total fat percentage pretty low. Now, if your calories are set correctly and your protein intake is set correctly, there's a good deal of wiggle room between the carbs and the fat ratio. And you can eat more fat and less carbs and still see great changes as long as you're eating enough carbs to support the training. So now we're going to train hard, and we want to minimize the chances of storing excess body fat. So we're going to pick a high carb, low fat ratio as opposed to the high fat, low carb ratio. And we not only want to make sure that we have enough carbs to support training, it's also an insurance policy if we happen to overeat. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say that your body burns exactly 2,000 calories today. Now let's say that you eat 2,100 calories, and that 100 calories comes from fat. Well, your body uses energy to digest the food that you eat, that it needs. So in order for your body to use up the fat, it's going to use about 2 to 3% of the calories that it just ate in terms of energy to digest it. So that means that only 97 or 98 of those calories will become body fat, and that 2 to 3 calories are going to be burned off as energy in the process. Now, if we back up a second, and instead of those 100 extra calories coming from fat, if we eat them in the form of carbohydrates, now 12 to 15% of the calories are burned off as energy, which means that only 12 to 15 of the calories are going to be used as energy, and the remainder are going to be stored as fat. So that's less fat because you burned off more as energy in the digestion process. And to take it even further, protein, in order to digest protein, it takes about 20 to 22% of the amount that you ate to burn off as metabolic heat. So the thing is, though, once our protein requirements are already set and met, more protein, it doesn't really show any benefit. But it's much more beneficial to include the carbs for the training than just try to eat only protein for this thermodynamic effect, right? So carbohydrates are fuel for your brain in your training, so it's much more important once you meet protein to go then to the carbohydrates. So that's that. You definitely need enough carbohydrates. You don't want to really mess that up, but there is some wiggle room between the carbohydrate and fat ratios. Ooh, alcohol. Well, it's a funny subject. Everyone basically wants to hear that they can go out and get trashed every weekend and still look like Mr. Olympia. But that is definitely not the case, and the fact of the matter is that alcohol will sabotage your efforts to build the best physique you can. And the more you drink, the more you will sabotage yourself. And if you party hard on weekends and you binge drink, your workouts are going to suffer. You're going to skip workouts. You're going to miss workouts at the gym. You won't be getting stronger. You'll basically be sabotaging yourself. So now if you have a glass of wine with dinner every night, it's not going to destroy your goals, but it's not going to help you build muscle either. So, most people, they're not willing to change things like that. They're stuck in their ways. But binge drinking is really not going to help. You may have heard clean eating versus the flexible eating. Now, whether you eat clean or flexible dieting, you should go through the process of determining your reference diet at least once, your baseline. So how do we do that? Well, let's see. How do we do that? Well, we write down what we eat over the course of 7 days. And then we do our best to use an online calculator to calculate your average daily intake. So there's a bunch of different websites you can go to. You can just go to Google and type in calorie calculator, and a bunch of different websites will pop up that you can type in food and see the content of it, protein, carbs, fats, and so on. And then you can plug it into the chart, the Excel file that is going to be downloadable under this section. So we write down what we eat for 7 days. We calculate the amount of calories over the course of those 7 days, and then we divide it by 7, right? 7 days a week to get the daily average. Now from there we're going to have a starting point to adjust from. So let's say that we calculated 2,000 calories a day. That's what we usually eat. Now if we want to build muscle, we're going to need to increase the amount of food. So how much? We're going to increase the amount of carbohydrates that we eat by 25%. So in the 2,000 calorie per day example, let's just say we weigh 200 pounds. And we need 0.8 grams per pound of body weight for protein. So that's 160 grams of protein, right? Now, to calculate, this is how it works. 1 gram of protein and 1 gram of carbohydrates are both equal to 4 calories. 1 gram of fat is equal to 9 calories. 1 gram of alcohol is equal to 7 calories. So here's how this works. We have 160 grams of protein at 4 calories a gram. That's 640 calories taken up by protein. Now we have to eat 2,000 every day to maintain. And the protein takes up 640, and that leaves us with 1,360 calories. Now if we remember from before, we also want to get 20% of our diet from fat. So 2,000 calories times 20%, that's 400. So we had 1,360 that we could use up after the protein. If we take away 400 from that for fat, that leaves us with 960 calories remaining for carbohydrates. We divide those calories by 4 and we get the number 240 grams. That's the amount of carbs that you're going to have to eat every day. Right? So we know exactly what we need to eat. And now, because we want to gain muscle, we're going to be increasing our carbs by 25%. So we needed 240 to maintain. If you multiply that by 1.25, which is an extra 25%, you get 300 grams of carbs. Now, this translates into an extra 240 extra calories a day. Beautiful. Now, we're going to eat this way, and we're going to see if we can gain half of a pound to 2 pounds per week. Now, we don't want to gain more than that necessarily, because we don't want to gain really too much fat if we don't have to. We want to just gain muscle, and you can only gain muscle at such a slow rate that there's no benefit to gaining a ton of weight too fast because it'll be fat. So as long as we're gaining that half a pound a week, we should really be ecstatic, because that's a great rate of progress, believe it or not. And after doing this for a period of time, which definitely should work, it'll eventually stop. And when it stops, you can increase the carbs another 25%. And this is going to spur further muscle growth. And don't be surprised if now you're getting in really great workouts because the carb levels are so high. Your muscles are always full of carbs, and you feel good overall. You know, the extra food, this is going to provide enough energy to repair your muscles, to grow stronger, and have energy left over for hard workouts. It's definitely a good feeling. So after you have increased your carbs in this way, you should keep gaining weight for a pretty good amount of time. And then when that stops, you know, when you have increased 25% and then 25% again, so now it's up 50%, once you start making progress, you should really look to other variables. So let's say, let's look at what we're doing cardio-wise, right? So let's see, what are we doing for cardio? Are we doing 3 sessions a week? When gaining mass, it might be beneficial to cut out cardio completely. You don't hear a lot of people say that, but you know what? If you want to gain muscle mass, it might be beneficial for some people. So it's not necessarily the best for cardiovascular health. And I do understand the benefits it has for recovery. I'm not even in between sets and things like that. But you know what? For just gaining pure size, some people are better off not doing cardio. That's my take on it. And so now if you up the carbs 50% and and you're not doing cardio, we're going to adjust from there. So, if you have a hard time keeping fat off, I don't recommend cutting out cardio completely, but if you're in good shape and need to gain size, do it. And that way your body has a singular focus. It focuses 100% of its energy towards one goal, growth. It's not taking any resources for recovery away for any other purpose caused by any other stimulus, right? So now you increased your carbs by 50%. You're not doing any cardio. Your muscle gains have stopped. Time to reevaluate. We got to look at our training log and we got to see, are we progressing in weights over the weeks? Are we doing too many sets? Have we been doing the same program for 6 months on end? Have we been skipping meals? Have we been missing protein shakes? Have we been getting enough sleep? Are we really stressed out? So we got to look at all those things after. You don't just want to, as soon as you hit a snag, just keep removing food like crazy, get over and over and over every time something happens. You stop making progress. That's not going to work out too well in the long term. So you definitely want to evaluate in this order. So as far as getting ripped, right? Listen, everybody wants to get ripped. Everybody wants a six-pack and for the muscles to show better. It's extremely important, though, that you do not try to crash diet. This is what so many people try to do. They drastically reduce what they eat in this attempt to burn body fat at the fastest pace. But the problem with this is that starving yourself causes you to lose weight, and while half of it will be fat, the other half will be muscle. And that's the last thing you want to happen, because that will slow down your metabolism, making you lose less and less weight until you end up skinny fat. So it's extremely important that we keep our hard-earned and energy-burning muscle. Therefore, it is imperative that we do not drastically cut our calories, and that we do so in a very mild manner. The more conservative the approach, the more likely the energy needed to make up the deficit will come almost exclusively from fat. And the same concept holds true with aerobics as well. If you do tons of cardio, up to 2 hours at one session, then just like with severe dieting, your body's going to burn both fat and muscle to fuel the session, and you don't want that. So remember, moderation is key. The goal to getting ripped is to lose body fat slowly while keeping any muscle you have. If you're ever doing more than 45 minutes, 4 to 5 times a week, you're doing way too much cardio. It's simply unnecessary. Either you haven't dieted properly, or you're trying to lose way too much, way too fast. You should start with 20-minute sessions 3 times a week. Let's see. If you're making progress with 3 sessions a week at 20 minutes, then you don't need to increase the amount of cardio you do. You have to learn to look for the small changes, right? And then these small changes over a long period of time will translate into permanent results. Quick gains are gains quickly lost. When you get results from putting in work over a long period of time, it takes a lot longer to detrain and go back to the old you. For example, if you take steroids, you can see massive results in a short period of time. But when you stop taking the steroids, you lose the results just as quickly. So I've been training for years. I built my body through a long period of time. And guess what? If I don't train for a month and I eat like a slob, I'll still have a six-pack and I'll still be strong. So the point I'm trying to hammer home is don't ever do anything drastic. Don't ever start eating way more or way less. Don't ever start training way more or way less. Go gradually in whatever direction you're going to go. All the small changes and all the tiny progress that is slow and painstaking, they really add up over time and create a new you. And you have to keep in mind that weight loss is not the goal when we want to get absolutely shredded. Fat loss is the goal, okay? Because we want to keep our muscle at all costs. So that means you cannot lose weight too quickly. You have to lose it slowly enough that it comes exclusively from fat. And you have to do everything you can to make sure you maintain your muscle mass. That means do not alter your weight training routine. Many people mistakenly change their weight training routine. I mean, it's crazy. The number of reps and the number of isolation exercises that they do in an effort to sculpt a certain muscle or to burn fat from a certain area, that's a bad idea. The workout stimulus that built your muscle in the first place is the same workout stimuluses that will maintain your muscle when you start eating less. So if you use heavy weights and compound movements to build your physique, now when you start dieting, that's the same stuff that's going to keep your muscle. If you start lowering the weight, doing easier exercises and more reps, that's going to be disaster, because now you're going to reduce the stimulus on the muscle and you're eating less. So you're going to lose muscle. You don't want that. So that's a huge mistake that a lot of people do when they have a contest coming up or something, is they just go crazy volume. They think they're sculpting with high reps. I don't know where these people got that idea. I guess it sounds kind of cool, right? Like, the more reps you do, you kind of can make like lines pop out or something. That would be cool, but that is not that is not the way it works. So that's why so many competitors, they're jacked, and then when they get on stage, they're tiny. They'll have so much muscle. They look so much worse. So if you diet to lose weight, you're going to lose both fat and muscle. If you only diet in your attempt to lose weight, you're going to lose both fat and muscle. Now, if you diet and do cardio to lose weight, you're still going to lose fat and muscle. Now, if you diet and do cardio and weight lift as heavy as you can manage in the rep ranges that we discussed, then you're going to lose mostly just fat. So do you understand the importance of training now? It helps you maintain your muscle so your metabolism stays revved up nice and high. The higher the metabolic rate, the higher the rate of fat loss. And that's why we want to keep our muscle at all costs. Plus, it looks really good, right? That's why we're in this game. So hopefully after establishing a baseline diet, you establish your daily macros, and then you're using carbohydrate timing, you're able to lose fat without changing the amount of calories you eat. So once we have a reference diet and our current weightlifting routine, and they stop producing measurable fat loss results, it's time to make a change in what we're doing, right? So it's very important, though, to change only one thing at a time. Now, if we eat less, increase cardio, take more supplements, increase reps on weight training, yeah, we might lose fat, but we're not going to know the primary cause. And even if every method helps to lose fat, we don't want to use all of our tools and strategies at once. We want to use one strategy at a time to its full effect. And then, when the results stop, we basically switch tools. And in this way, we never get to exhaust our tools, and we can make long-term progress. So when we're trying to get shredded, first let's make sure that we're actually following the baseline diet. Let us make sure that we're actually getting the daily macros that we calculated every day in terms of protein, fat, and carbohydrates. Then let's make sure we're actually on a training schedule, that we have some type of plan, some type of program we're following and keeping track of, right? I mean, 99.99% of people are not at this level where they just did those things. Okay? So now we're assuming that we're at the point where we've done those, and if you've done those, you're probably getting a lot better results than most people. Because they're not willing to do this. They're not disciplined enough to eat this, the macros that every day that they're supposed to. So, but if you're doing it, great, and then let's continue. So once we're disciplined with the diet and we're disciplined with our training, we can begin to adjust. The first thing we're going to do to get ripped is to decrease the calories. Now, we don't want to touch the protein because we absolutely need it to maintain our muscle and support our hard training. Remember, we spoke about before, the less calories you have, the more you're going to rely on the protein. So we definitely don't want to reduce the protein. As a matter of fact, a lot of people increase it at this point, but we're going to reduce the carbs by itself. So Let's see. What was I saying? Okay, well, yeah. So we want to reduce the carbs. We never want to do anything drastic. We want to make small changes and then milk them for as much as we can, results-wise. So we're going to cut carbs by 25%. So in the previous example, we had to eat 240 grams of carbs to maintain our weight at 2,000 calories. And now, to lose fat, we're going to reduce that by 25% to get to 180 grams, which is 240 calories less. So that may not seem like a lot, but remember, it's a 25% cut, so the more calories you eat, the bigger the cut is going to be. And such a mild cut is going to make sure that the trainee does not get weak and that their body doesn't get too big of a shock. So you're looking for a loss of like half a pound to 1 pound of fat per week. And you don't want to lose more than this, because the more you lose above this level, the more likely you are to be losing muscle as well. So as long as you're still losing half a pound of fat per week, you're making great progress and you don't need to change anything. And once the initial 25% cut of carbs stops giving you any more fat loss, then it's time to add in cardio work, right? So, because remember, it's one tool at a time. You want to make small adjustments, see what works. When it stops, then we'll throw in something else. So at this point, time to do cardio. And with cardio, we're going to start off with 2 to 3 30-minute sessions. And these sessions should start producing that half pound fat loss per week again. If you continue, just continue to do this until you're no longer reaching that half pound mark again. So now let's say you've already cut your carbs by 25%. You're now doing 3 sessions of cardio, 30 minutes each time, and your results have stopped fat loss wise. So feel free to add in a 4th cardio day, and when that stops, a 5th cardio day, and when that stops, you can increase the training time from your cardio sessions from 30 minutes and work your way slowly up to 45 minutes. Now once you're doing 5 sessions a week at 45 minutes a clip of cardio, I do not recommend adding any more, no matter what. I even think that's a lot, but you could do it. You could definitely do it if you really wanted to get really ripped. So you could totally do that 5 days a week, 45 minutes. But I don't recommend going beyond that unless you're a competitor and you know what you're doing. But in that, unless you're competing, I don't recommend it. So also keep in mind, as an adult male, we don't want to drop below like 1,600-ish calories a day, because that's the danger zone. That's what we need to eat to maintain our body regular function. So if we drop below that, we're going to start losing muscle at a really accelerated pace, and our metabolism is going to grind to a halt because our body's going to think we're starving. And for women, the amount is even lower because they require less calories in general to maintain. So let's say don't drop below 1,200 as a female. You never want your metabolism to drop like that. You want to keep it as high as possible. So you want as much muscle as possible, and the more food we can eat to maintain our weight, the better. That way when we diet, we have room to go down without coming near the starvation zone. Makes sense, right? I think you should stay lean, relatively lean, year round. Don't try to do a giant bulk and giant cuts. It's just not that efficient. It's much more effective and efficient to stay around 12% year round, and then when you want to go to the beach, 3 months in advance, start cutting and get yourself down to 7%. That's it. And when summer's over, let yourself get back up to 12% by slowly increasing what you eat again. It's a lifestyle, and you look good year round. So as far as cardio is concerned, most people think of treadmills and the elliptical, Stairmaster, or some type of repetitive activity that makes your heart beat fast and your lungs work overtime. And it's usually categorized into 2 different sections: low intensity cardio and high intensity cardio. Now, intensity refers to the amount of effort needed from the body. So high intensity demands a great short burst of effort, causing the heart rate to beat super fast, and your body's going to be working so hard that your lungs are not going to be able to catch up with that demand. So like when you do an all-out sprint, your muscles, heart, and lungs, they're all working as hard as they can, and it's so intense that you can't inhale enough oxygen to keep up with the demand. So your body fatigues incredibly quickly, which is why you can only sprint for so long. And then when you're done, you're bent over breathing like a maniac for 5 minutes, just trying to get enough oxygen in your system to make up for the huge demand you just placed on it. On the other hand, you can keep up a slow jog for hours on end. The demands at any moment are low enough that you can breathe easily enough to recover as you run to keep you going for a long time. Lower intensity work burns fewer calories and fails to encourage around-the-clock fat loss. If you look at sprinters, their extremely high intensity work produces the hormones that make sure they're fat-burning machines. Their average heart rate is so high that they burn a bunch of calories. But although high intensity work is great, you have to use it wisely. I mean, you can't be doing that stuff every single day, especially if you also perform taxing leg workouts. You don't want your leg training to suffer because of your cardio training. So low intensity days, they are definitely great for a switch up. So that way you don't get bored, and they're great for recovery because you won't be taxing your system as hard, and that way you'll have a chance to rejuvenate a little bit, recover a little bit. It'll increase, and the lower intensity cardio, it's more aerobic training, and it will help increase your aerobic capacity, which is actually good for your health and does lead to reduced recovery times in between your sets. So that's pretty much the scoop on cardio. You just slowly increase it until you're at the 5 times a week, 45-minute mark. You can throw high intensity in if you like, but not if it interferes with your workouts. That's pretty much it.